That's for sure. Harmonize coming through with Magufuli. Isn't that a beautiful song?
Magufuli.
Yes, Magufuli.
I love that. Let's talk about the advancements in being able to send money anywhere on the African continent. Africa's financial landscape is changing rapidly. From mobile money to cross-border payment systems, transactions that once took days are now happening in seconds, driving financial inclusion and opening up new opportunities for individuals and small businesses across the continent. But as payments become faster, so do the risks. Fraud tactics are evolving just as quickly, with identity theft and account takeovers exploiting the small window institutions have to detect suspicious activity. In South Africa, the rise of real-time payments is placing growing pressure on banks and FinTechs to balance speed, security, and regulation. We've got our guest who is the head of FinTech at TransUnion, Mladen Čolić. I hope I said it properly, joining us on the line. Mladen, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to The Upside. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Well, thank you, and spot on with the surname pronunciation.
Well done.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Can I have my trophies? Let's talk about this growing financial landscape in South Africa. Earlier in my intro, I said it used to take days at times to be able to transfer money from, let's say, South Africa to Kenya or Zimbabwe. Now it's happening at such a rapid rate. Let's talk about the evolution and the advancements that we are seeing in this fintech space.
Absolutely, and a great question. And again, good afternoon to your listeners. If you just take a step back, I think if you look where Africa has come and where it's going, we really had a watershed moment in terms of having a very young, mature market when it comes to the age of our demographics, but also the maturity with regards to using mobile telephones and mobile devices. And this amalgamation of having a youthful population who is comfortable with using technology has really started to see this adoption. I think in your intro you mentioned their cross-border digital wallets, the super apps. We've got the M-Pesas in Kenya, and we've got the VodaPays in South Africa, and the likes all over the African continent. It's really been a function of a young, up-and-coming working class population that is very comfortable and has built in trust into the use of these technologies and these payment rails to start to facilitate and utilize these technologies. If we look at historically, the payment rails, let's call it that, were built in a way that required the middleman being outside of Africa to clear and settle these accounts. And that was where the cost and the friction in time took place. And that's where the days to clear a settlement to Kenya took. What's happening now in Africa is we're solving Africa's problems with African technology, with African mindsets, and we don't necessarily need a middleman that doesn't necessarily sit in Africa or sit elsewhere in the world. So it's making sure that regulation is upheld at all times, that we know who the money is being sent to. It's the trust of the consumer to use these technologies is all driving down one cost, which is then driving adoption, which is then driving the speed where I can send money to my uncle or my mother back to wherever for them to then generate and utilize those funds for either living expenses or who knows, starting a small business, on that side of the world. So it's a multifactored reason as to why we're seeing it, how we've seen the progression, and the impact it's having on the African continent.
Very interesting. I mean, I'm just looking at your title, Head of FinTech. That's the job for the now and the future, that's for sure, because the world is moving fast and so is our money. In conversation with Mladen Čolić, Head of FinTech and TransUnion. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a jiffy.
Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
Assuring sustainable water availability for every home, every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Fresh and exciting. The Upside, hooking you up with today's news from the African perspective.
Welcome back. We're 22 minutes into 3 p.m. talking about the evolving space of digital payments on the African continent. And what we're seeing is that there is growth, and this is very fast growth within the mobile money and cross-border systems, if you will, that's allowing transactions to happen in seconds. Mladen continues to join us on the line in his capacity as the head of FinTech at TransUnion. So let's talk about fraud. Okay, I think we can appreciate the speed, but some of the most common spaces where we see fraudulent behavior happening is within this particular sector. So what are the common fraud tactics that we are seeing today, Mladen?
Great question. And I think, if we just look at the types of fraud, being digital means we are 24/7. It means that we are always on. And in the intro, we mentioned the window where these financial institutions have to make a go or no-go decision on that consumer coming through their gate or their door needs to be almost instantaneous. And you can only really do that by having a number of different data aspects or data sources or data elements on that individual. So when we look at speed, you also want to make sure that, as I mentioned, you're letting the right person in and you're creating friction in the system that the bad actors know that you are onto them, so that they stop. They're constantly changing the operatus mundi, which is obviously one of the main concerns, which sees these different types of frauds occur. But one of the main ones we see is, unfortunately, the African continent is prone to a number of data breaches, which means that some of your data may be in the dark web, and these fraudsters may create a Frankenstein, what we call. So it's Mladen's name and someone else's ID and someone else's cell phone, and they try and find and expose the weak links in these financial institutions. And that's why when it comes to fraud, it's really a layered approach that protects these financial institutions. So it's something that I know about the person, so validation of the ID, a photo, a selfie, so I can make sure that I'm talking to the person that I think that I'm talking to on the other side. Then it's also the device itself, so the cell phone, the Android or iPhone or the watch or the Internet of Things. It could be a fridge, it could be a PlayStation, anything that connects to an internet, in essence, creates a doorway for potential real-time fraud events to happen. So can we see the device and can we link it to a good device or a bad device? So when you start thinking about fraud in the new world, in this digital world, it's not a check anymore, someone's, copycatting a check or document tampering. It is now so sophisticated, and these fraudsters are trying to catch up and are sometimes one step ahead at times, and we wouldn't be having this conversation if no fraud ever existed. But really, fraud in the new world that we live in is around layering. It's about having intelligent, proactive data to ensure that you have as much confidence in allowing that consumer through your doors, extending that credit, business or consumer, so that you know that you will be paid back, and it's not actually a first-party fraud where this person had no intention of ever paying you back.
Mladen, what do we need to look out for as users of these platforms? Oftentimes you'll find that a brother, a sister, or an aunt, an uncle is trying to send money to a different part of the continent, and it's often an urgent request. I need money now, and they overlook certain red flags when they're transacting. What do we need to look out for as the end users of these platforms? Yes, we get the money quickly. That's amazing, but then we also, we open ourselves up to being, taken to what's a word of saying it, to be taken to the gutters by fraudsters. So what do we need to look out for as the end users?
I think, there is, and it's a great question, because we do need to take ownership as the consumer as well. We unfortunately hear a number of, illicit schemes or companies that are just here to, fly by nights. We do need to do a bit of our own homework, so I do employ the listeners to not just take everything at face value. It is unfortunate that we live in a world where the deep fakes, so those are, someone taking a picture of yourself and making and generating a video where, we've seen really unsavory events happening where a deep fake is sent to a family member asking for help, and someone sending money to that individual, but it was never me who actually was in distress. So it really does take, and my urge is to the listeners is to take ownership. If it is a SMS around a company that your loved one wants you send money, Google the company. Check that they have their NCR license, and I'm only referring to the South Africa. Are they a financial institution? What is the FSP license? Have a look at their website. Is it taking you to an URL that is not in South Africa? You do need to be a little bit tech savvy, but there are also Google reviews. And, if this company has no Google reviews, that's potentially something that may trigger something for you to just double click on, because, a company that has never been used or no one's ever given a review on, maybe a shelf company that's just started the night before, the day before, the week before. So my number one recommendation is really to take ownership of what you're doing. It is your money. It is your hard-earned money. You want to make sure that you validate and you verify that this company. Secondly is contact your loved one and say, I got this SMS. Did it come from you? And which company did you use? Ratify and verify that it is a company that they are actually using from their side. So I'd say those are the two main ones, because there are so many fintechs and institutions that are coming up, and it is obviously difficult to keep abreast of every single one. But if you just really keep your eye out on a few key aspects, I really do believe it will aid that you don't succumb to one of these unfortunate victims.
Right. Well, I love that this very quickly turned into a good awareness campaign on exactly what we need to do. Small things that we actually take for granted, that Mladen is mentioning, like checking a Google review. Already that is a big part of your research, so that you can determine. But it is so interesting to see what is happening in fintech, and to see this trade-off between speed and security. And what the future of sending and receiving money is like. Mladen, thank you very much for the time. I think this was incredibly informative, and hopefully it won't be the first and last time we chat to you. Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day, team. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mladen Čolić, joining us in his capacity as head of FinTech at TransUnion. It is 3:30.
Sports on